Okay, it's 4:05. Let's go ahead and get started. So, hi everyone, welcome to our Residency 101 panel. I'm Annie Nguyen, our Professional Development Director here at APAMSA. I have just a few quick housekeeping notes before we get started. First, this event is being recorded, so please turn your cameras on if you're comfortable. Our speakers would really love to see you. We're going to start with some short presentations, followed by a Q&A, and then we will end with some more questions that can be tailored towards specialties. We will end right at 5:30, and we ask that you hold your questions until the Q&A. Feel free to drop them in the chat, but please don't unmute while the presenters are speaking. And finally, as an official disclaimer, our speakers are not speaking on behalf of their institutions. Rather, their insights reflect their personal opinions and their commitment to uplifting you all as the next generation of NHOPE medical leaders. We are so excited to have them here with us today, and I will be calling in the help of our incredible leadership committee member, Gen, to help with introductions. So first we have Dr. Gangamurthy. She earned her medical degree from the University of Oklahoma and completed her pediatrics residency at Duke, where she also served as the pediatric chief resident. Dr. Murthy is now an assistant professor in pediatric infectious diseases and is an assistant research professor at the Duke Global Health Institute. She serves as an associate program director for the Duke Pediatric Residency Program.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Gen. I'm also excited to introduce Dr. Herlene Rye. She obtained her MD from Ross University and completed her pathology residency at Case Western. Dr. Rye then completed a 2-year fellowship in transfusion medicine at the NIH, and John Hopkins serves as the assistant professor of pathology and associate director of the clinical pathology residency program.
Perfect. Our third speaker is Dr. Stephanie Shao. She earned her MD from UCSF, where she also completed her internal med residency and general cardiology fellowship as the chief resident and chief cardiology fellow. Dr. Shao is currently the associate program director of the Stanford Cardiology Fellowship.
And next we have Dr. Stephen Chen, who earned his MD and MPH from Johns Hopkins. And he then pursued residency training at Harvard, where he completed an internal medicine residency at Beth Israel Medical Center and his dermatology residency at Harvard. Dr. Chen is now an assistant professor at Harvard and an associate program director for the dermatology residency.
And last but not least, we have Dr. Caroline Shivakul-Klein. She received her medical degree from Boston University and completed her internal med residency at NYU. She is now an assistant professor at NYU and serves as an associate program director for their internal medicine residency program. We are thrilled to have such a star-studded panel today, and let's kick it off with Dr. SK, who will give us some insights on preparing for interview day.
That's me. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. So I figured I would start with this sort of preparing for interview section by telling you guys about kind of the philosophy behind interviews. So about the interview. And the thing I want you to know and keep in mind is that interviewers are all humans, if you can believe that. And what all humans want are kind of the same things. We want to go to work and we want to meet some cool people, residents, our colleagues, patients. We want to learn interesting things at work. We want to come home. We want to chill with my family and my friends. I want to hug my cat. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to worry about work. I don't want to worry about the next day. Oh my God, I have to deal with this resident. He's so mean to me or whatever. And so what I want you to keep in mind about the interview itself is that really this is a vibe check. Okay? We all, again, want the same things. You want to work with interesting people who are fun to be around and who you like working with, and so do we. And so as you're preparing for an interview, think of the kind of person that you would want to be, who you like working with. I mean, you guys have been on clerkships and all that. You know who's fun to be around, who's not fun to be around, and what kind of person you want to be. The second thing I want to make sure that you know about is I want you to be genuine. It takes all kinds of people, right? I don't want you to, if you're not the kind of person who goes out there and just like turns it up to 10, 100% of the time, don't do that in the interview. It takes all kinds of people. And so be genuine, show up as yourself, and you're going to be rewarded for that. We can go to the next slide. So I know that I think the more common questions can be kind of covered a little bit later, but I wanted to sort of prepare for 3 broad categories. The first is questions about you and your interest in the specialty. Second category is questions about how you act or react to certain situations, completely non-medical. And the third is questions about the program itself. And we can go to the next slide. So regarding questions about you, and I want to let you know straight up right now that you have accomplished a lot, and I am very, very proud of you. Okay. But the problem with interviews is that they're typically between 10 and 30 minutes. And so everybody, if you want to get your CVs out, I'm going to call you out right now. Okay. Everybody's CV has at least 3 of these 4 things: research, community service, organizational leadership, or tutoring and mentoring. And everybody's hobbies includes 4 out of the 5 following things: some sort of outdoor thing, cooking or baking, one of the 2, something musical, some sort of either nerdy or domestic thing. The most common is knitting, crochet, and board games, and some kind of sport. And this does include dance and fantasy football. It's never fantasy hockey. It's always football. And everybody's letters of recs, you can be rest assured, they all say you are God's gift to mankind. And so what does this mean? This really, it's very hard to tell the difference between all of these people, because everybody has accomplished so much, right? You're in med school, you're amazing already. And so what we want to get out of the interview is we really want to know you, because everybody on paper looks very hard. We can go to the next slide. So this is how to not be basic. The more you can distill yourself down and have a really clear vision on who you are and you want to be in your career, that's going to benefit you. Okay. So distill all this information down, what's most important to you, into like a 1 or 2 minute pitch. And this is basically how you're going to answer that question. Tell me about yourself. Commit to a certain theme and really ride that theme to the end. Because again, we want to get a sense of what you're passionate about, because all the stuff in your CV, like I said, so many people out here just checking check boxes, and that's not what reflects what their passions are. And we want to know who you are and what we're going to end up getting when we take you. Tying your personal statement, again, it makes everything a little bit stronger. We can move to the next. Clear vision of who you are. There's a few common archetypes that people kind of lean on: the research person, med ed, QI, community service, advocacy, or sort of business. Think about sort of what your CV says, what you're passionate about, and how you can tie kind of all this together. The next step then is to relate kind of who you are and what your passions are into the specialty that you're going into. We want to see people who are excited to join our field, no matter what it is. If you have have a sense of what your ultimate career goals are, you're academic, or you're going to be sort of like the small town doctor and you're going to be the guy, that's awesome. Ambiguity is okay. Again, we're human. We've been exactly where you were, not super, super long ago. And we know how hard it is to really define that at this stage. But if you have a sense, great, you should work it in there. We can go to the next slide. Second category is questions about how you act and react. And what these questions are really trying to get to is just like, are you a reasonable person at work? Okay. If you already don't want to come here, it's going to be hard for me to be excited about you being here and being resentful, right? What's your EQ like? Can you take feedback? Can you look at yourself and look at things that need improvement and say, hey, yeah, I can work on myself, and take that negative feedback and learn and grow? When you make a mistake, can you learn from it? And really, what is your attitude? How positive or pleasant are you to be around? If you haven't read it, the book on the left is called Thanks for the Feedback. It's like a fairly famous book, I suppose. And it is about taking and giving feedback. And I think it's really helpful to get yourself in kind of the mindset of like, you're not a finished product yet. Again, your applications make it seem like you're a completely finished product. And even myself, and I'm sure all the rest of the guys on this call know, you are not a finished product. Okay, we're always working on ourselves. And we want to make sure that when we accept somebody, we get somebody who is into that idea and wants to grow. We can go to the next slide. These take many different forms, and I think one of the other speakers is going to be taking sort of more specific questions, but it's frequently a scenario. Tell me about the time you received negative feedback. Tell me the hardest thing you've done in med school. And as you answer these questions, tell it like a story. It's much more compelling. We can go to the next slide. If you have trouble with storytelling, Um, you can use sort of these steps to help yourself get organized, right? What is the situation that you're placed in? What was the problem that you faced? What was the action that you took? And reflect on that action. Was it right? Was it wrong? Is there something that you learned about? And that's the result of what you learned. Next slide. Lastly, questions about the program. The bare minimum is you have to read the website. If you're not willing to read the website, please do not apply. I'm not interested, okay? You have to read the website. But really the best way to kind of research the program and understand the program itself is talk to current residents about what their life is like. Most places will have some sort of like pre-interview day event where you can talk to residents and kind of network with them. And you can also leverage your local kind of alumni network. See, have we sent anybody there? And do you know anybody there? Your local institutions, ask your mentors to connect with somebody sort of at your target institution. I think faculty can also be a valuable resource in figuring out what life is like there. And everybody, I guess, has an Instagram page nowadays. You can use it. It's kind of cool. It can give you a sense of kind of the residency camaraderie, but comes with a lot of caveats of social media. It's constructed. It gives you sort of the best of the best. But that is how I would say you can best sort of research the program just beyond the website. Next slide. And in this, what I'll tell you is that we're vibe checking you just to make sure you're not a sociopath, but you get to vibe check the program too. And so anybody that you meet, please ask them questions about their experience, because this is really valuable for you too, right? If you're not a researcher and everybody in your interview day is talking about all the amazing research opportunities they have, maybe that's not the vibe you're going for. And so this is valuable feedback for you, and it helps show interest in the program, that you're really trying to find out who they are, and if this is really, truly a good place for you to be. Practicing interviews. If your local institution has mock interviews, you should do that. Take the feedback you get seriously. Again, it's not even about you. It's about how somebody else is perceiving you. And I think that is valuable to at least think about. If you know you suck at interviewing and you want to be extra, I'm going to have you do the worst thing that you will ever do, which is record yourself answering questions. It's going to give you a lot of information about, do you use a lot of filler words? Are you very hesitant? And that can inform the way you go about your interview. If you can't bear to do that, you might want to practice a bit. The ANC's website actually has a pretty reasonable guide about like preparing for interviews. It has like lots of sample questions. I think it's worth a skim through. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Shao. It's really a pleasure to be here. Such wonderful resources. I wish I had all of this when I was at your stage of training. We can move on to the next one. And so we're going to talk about preparation for the interview and then actually kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of things, specifically the logistics. And so in terms of residency interview, you probably will see most of them in virtual. There might still be some in-person interviews, but I'm going to kind of give you tidbits for both. For the traditional in-person interview, I definitely would recommend you arrive in a day in advance. Don't rush. Whatever energy you bring into a space essentially will be the energy that the interviewer is receiving. And so making sure you arrive in the city nice and calm, try to get a good night's sleep and walk around the city, walk around the hospital, and getting used to the environment will be hugely helpful. And if you can, try to space out interviews weekly. Don't try to pack like all the interviews back to back in the same city. And this is the honest truth that when I was interviewing down in LA, I think I actually mistakenly mentioned a program with the wrong name, and then that scarred me for life. And so whatever you can, make sure you show up at the program and then really intend to interview at that program. And then if you are worried about saying the wrong thing, and just say, tell me more about your program. And then I know you guys are juggling a lot and probably are interviewing at multiple places at the same time. For the in-person interview, I would say, what things to bring and things to carry is, in the digital age, it's less important to have copies of your CV, notepad with questions to ask, but it always looks, I would say, probably more professional if there's something that you're holding on to. So a lot of people bring these like old school portfolio folder that will still work. And for women's, most of them, have a handbag. Please don't bring anything flashy, things that are understated. You want to be noticed really for you as a professional, not other ways of decoration. And I would say, same thing about arriving into a city and arriving into an environment. On the day of the interview, I would say arrive in an hour in advance. It might sound a lot, but that hour goes by so quickly. And, whatever you can to really bring yourself, presenting as your authentic self. And the one thing I would say that a lot of, in your interview list, at least this is the game that we know we play. There are your reach list, and then there are like the programs that you feel like, yeah, that's kind of where I am, and then there are like backup programs. And so I think on the day of the interview, you really want to throw all of that out the window. You just want to be there and imagining yourself that this is who I am, where I want to be. And a couple of advice for the REACH program. It's very, very common to have some sort of imposter syndrome, and don't let that get to you. The fact that you got invited for an interview, you already deserve to be there and probably more than enough. So just get that out the door, get that out of your mind. And then whatever, like grounding practices, whatever you can, eat a full meal, go to the bathroom if you can, walk around, and then knowing where the check-in space is, just to arrive and then really be present. And then for the virtual interview, I think it's much calmer. Obviously you have more control over your environment, and then Zoom very well, the link well. And so log on 30 minutes in advance you can, making sure everything still works. Test your lighting, test your microphone. Make sure to disable notification. We all get a bunch of emails flying through and text messages, and then make sure to disable that. And I would say background. Keep it very, very simple because it is very, very distracting when there's like too pretty of a background. And interviewers are humans as well. So I would recommend if you have like a professional virtual background, just put that on. And then, but if you have a home background, make sure, no more than two things or three things in the back, and use neutral color if you can. Okay. So, as the prior speakers have said, like you really want to show up and be yourself. And, there's like a spectrum of us. Some people are extroverted, introverted, and some people get excited with unknown. Some people feel, not as excited when things are less predictable, and that's okay. I think the most important thing is that you show up engaged. And interviewers, I think, sitting on the interview side, the my worst fear is when the conversation is so dry and slow, and I feel like the interviewee doesn't want to be there. And then it's like so painful to just get through the next 20 and 30 minutes. So whatever you can, like bring your most, like thinking about meeting a new person. What about this new person that I can actually engage? Is really the most important thing. And then try to get a sense of the interview style quickly. Some interviewers, just and trust your instincts. The reality is that we all come in with our personality. Some people are very reserved, and the questions they ask you are very standardized. Tell me about your research. How did you plan this project? Like what went wrong? And then some interviewers are, like more humanistic, and they might give you some kind of curveball questions. One of my favorite program director that I work with, his favorite question to ask is, who would you invite to dinner? Name three people. And so getting to know your interviewer and their personality, and then try to just mirror that. If they're like the high energetic type, try to respond the same way. If they're more like reserved, calm, serious, then try to mirror the same as well. And then interviewer tend to have phenotype, just like how applicants are. And then the reality, while there might be some uncertainty in what you want to do in the future, at this point in your life, you probably know. At least like what are your gravitational force? Are you interested in clinical kind of QI and meeting patients at bedside and then treating patients, seeing them getting better, get you really excited? Are you more like the physician scientist phenotype? Are you med ed program director phenotype? And then for example, like myself, I have taught throughout high school and college and as tutor and as a small group leader. So it was very clear to me that med ed all the way. And so whatever it is that you already have a theme and then exercise that theme and then really take every opportunity to just really show that that's who you are about. And that's also very helpful because the interviewer can remember you and automatically, cognitively, they will try to figure out like where you are in that phenotype. And then if later it comes to ranking, it's easier for them to advocate for you if everything makes sense. Be ready to explain the past, the present, and the future. Nowadays the eras like experiences are like 20 plus, and then their experiences are like meaningful, impactful, and it's really quite overwhelming. Just like prior introduction, that everyone just looks amazing. And I have an 11-year-old son. Like, I have no idea how he's gonna compete. Like, sometimes I look at our cardiology applicants and I'm thinking about if I apply today, I would never get in. So you guys are amazing. You do so much, and making sure you distill it down into your personal kind of narrative, and I appreciate the word branding, but there's some components of like, kind of like marketing yourself. But the truth is, it's not just about marketing yourself. It's like really just telling your story and show up as your like why you're here. Why are you here on this planet doing the things that you're doing? And then so making sure you present yourself in that coherent story way. All right. So the group interviews, I would say, is my least favorite. It's hard for the interviewers as well, because then they're working with their dynamic and then making sure there are not overlapping questions. And that everyone is like a little bit awkward, a little bit nervous. It's okay. So I would say the group interviews tend to be probably more formalized in the questions that are easily anticipated. So it probably will be questions about, oh, tell me about, like how did you overcome a challenging patient encounter? Tell me about your biggest weakness. Tell me about how do you work through conflict. It's almost like these like vetted questions that you can prep for it very well. And then it probably won't get to a personal level as much. It's just a little bit difficult with so many people in the room. And so most of the questions, and then also your questions to the interviewers, you can take advantage of that and just ask questions more on the programmatic or institutional level. And so the simple questions would be like, that's you're interviewing at an academic institution with, that's a like large, like 40 trainee per class. And then, you can mention something about I'm interested in advocacy in this sort. Are there any mentorship or specific pathway that I can get involved? And then so you can take advantage of the fact that it's a group interview, and then so essentially ask questions that are more on the institutional organizational level. And usually those questions are very safe, and then people like to talk because they know, and so you can get through those times very smoothly. And I would say stay away from controversial topics because you just don't know like who's in the room and then how do you engage. And it's a little bit hard to read people as well. And so, there will always be like an informal setting, such as like a hospital tour or a Zoom kind of like chat room around noontime. Again, be excited, be enthusiastic, even if you're not. But another thing is also note that while it's informal, you're always, always, always observed. It's never not observed. And we know it. Oftentimes after a awkward interaction, interviewees or essentially like co-resident or co-fellows would text APDs and PDs afterwards and said that there was a little bit of red flag. So everyone's watching and just making sure that you watch what you say and then your language and your attitude. And I would say informal setting is a great time to ask questions about like rotation and call schedules, just because the faculty level, sometimes they don't really know all the details. And then when you ask them all these questions, it seems like all you care about is how many work hours and am I going to break like duty hours and stuff like that. So I think these informal setting are a great way to ask call schedules. You don't want to hog the entire conversation about call schedule either, because then it becomes like a weird thing later. And so just read the room. If someone already asked that questions, no need to harp on it unless something is not clear. And about where to live, transportation costs is always a very good, useful, and safe questions. Questions about culture are hard to ask. I wouldn't say, "Oh, tell me about the culture of the institution." It doesn't really work like that. And especially when if there's something a little bit toxic about the institution, they wouldn't tell you anyway. So what you want to do is to elicit questions that can show you the culture of the institution. So questions would be like, "Oh, tell me a little bit about like job placement. How much like help do you get from your faculty? Do faculty and residents hang out, outside of work? What is the social situation like?" These are really great questions that you can just get a sense of like, is this like a family-like type of training environment, or is very, very hierarchical? Questions about hospital operations in terms of how much support you get, like whether or not the EMR actually is integrated and things work and labs work and all that stuff, and can be good questions as well. And yeah, I already talked about career planning, fellowship, and job placement.
Hey, good afternoon, or I guess on my side, it's good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Rai. I go by Sophie, so please feel free if you want to move on to our next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about interview a day itself. A lot of these things my colleagues here have gone over, and I really just want to second what they say. Be yourself, because we can 100% tell when you're not being your authentic self. So we're going to go over a little bit about how to handle challenging interview questions that you got a little bit of introduction to, some common pitfalls and red flags, and then asking thoughtful questions. So next slide, please. So handling challenging questions. These common type of questions, and I think, I have a list of them in some subsequent slides, but let's stay here. These really are trying to focus on personality characteristics. Keep in mind, you have gotten the interview. You have made it. On paper, you look great. So, throw that imposter syndrome out the window, as some of my colleagues have already said. This is your chance to really be evaluating us as a program. Do we have what you guys need, and whatnot? So I would really say focus on what you want out of a specific program. Even if it's not your top choice, act like it's your top choice. 100% act like it is your top choice. The common type of questions you really will get from a faculty level in an interview perspective is times you talk about weaknesses and mistakes you've made and how you've dealt with them. Application red flags. If there's a gap in your CV, you want to explain that. If you've had lower grades or board scores, you also want to explain that. Not the actual score itself, but tie it into how you made it through and what got you to this point, because obviously there was something in that application that got you that interview. So it's really about tying it all together like a story about things that make you who you are today. And then obviously you'll get questions about conflict and difficult situations and how you dealt with those things. And then situational and ethical dilemmas. These are less common on how would you deal with a patient situation where your colleague administered the wrong medication and did not document properly. I've seen that on like Reddit boards and other things. Less likely, but it may come up. So I always say, really practice these types of questions beforehand and think about how you would honestly and truly deal with a situation like that. Next slide, please. So common types of interview questions you'll get. Tell me about yourself and how you got here. So what got you from point A to point B? For example, I went to a Caribbean medical school myself. So on paper, I took the very long way around and now I'm sitting at Hopkins as an assistant professor. There is value in that. I really think everybody's story is unique and it really goes to show you how you're able to communicate that with the interviewer. It really, really is impactful. So don't discredit yourself on that. Why this specialty? So now this is a big one, right? You really want to articulate what about, your training, meaning your schooling up to this point got you interested. For example, pathology. Why do you want to do pathology? What makes that interesting to you? And you can tie it back to your CV, highlighting things about yourself and what got you to this point. So I would say really just talk about why you want this specialty. If you're unable to articulate this on interview day, that could be seen as a red flag, meaning that you're not as interested as, you may look on paper. And then what you are looking for in a program. Interviewers will ask you this, what are you looking for in a program? It really kind of delves into whether or not, one, you've looked through the website, right? I think one of my colleagues here had mentioned the bare minimum is to read the website. Each program, especially when it comes to residency, has strengths and weaknesses. Some are more community based, some are more academic based, some are smaller, some are bigger. So what you're looking for in a program really kind of highlights one of the things that this particular program you're interviewing with may be able to help you. Now, if you're not, like I said before, if you're not interested, like it's not your number one choice of the program that you were currently interviewing at, don't tell somebody that. Pretend like it is, right? Because you're taking time. If that's something, that came up, you're taking time from an interview we could have given to someone else. And it could really be seen as a red flag in that situation. And then why should we choose you or what makes you stand out? It's really to kind of wrap up everything you may have talked about with the interviewer, what your CV highlights, and other things. So, sometimes in between what is your CV and the time you get the interview, things may have updated. You may have had a new situation, a new challenge, a new award. Make sure you let your interviewer know, like, since you have read my application, this, and this happened, and this is how I dealt with the situation. So you really, really want to highlight the good things about yourself. Tell me about a challenging situation and how you handled it. I think this has come up on a couple of slides now. We're looking at your EQ, I think, as Caroline mentioned, really how you will be as a colleague. Will it be fun and easy per se to work with you? Will you put patient care first? Will you, be a very thorn in someone's side and others will be like, I really don't want to work with this person. It really is just trying to highlight the things that, you find challenging and how you brought it back to end up with for the better, what you learned from that. And then feedback is huge. How do you receive feedback, right? I really want to second the book that was mentioned earlier. I read it myself. I wish I read it earlier. I read it as a fellow interviewing for my first job, right? So I really do recommend just practicing feedback in a situation where it's medical school versus residency can look really different. How that feedback is given and how you receive that feedback. I think the most important point to always take into consideration is feedback is never meant to belittle you. It's meant to make you better. And the interviewers or the person giving you may be human as well, and they may not be able to communicate it as well as you like, but it's really always to make you better. Next slide, please. So the match process and timeline, if you just want, yes, if you want to go through this. So, did I make this slide? My apologies. Oh snap, did I really make this
This
slide?
might have been a mistake on my part.
Oh no, you're fine. I guess I was gonna say your match registration. I can go over this. I don't know whose slide it is, but your match registration is probably already open by now. You'll start receiving interview invites between October and December. I would really second what Stephanie has said. Space out your interviews. And give yourself some time to research each program. And if you make a mistake, it's okay. And I will let my next colleague go. But I would say on interview day, the most important thing is to be yourself, bring your best energy, and oh, one piece of advice: don't wear clothing with stains. I think, a lot professionalism speaks a lot. Like honestly, it really, really, really speaks a lot to who you are or how others may perceive you, and how much interest you show in a program. Wearing clean clothing, having it ironed, choosing something that makes you feel good and is still professional is very important. And just putting your best foot forward. For virtual interviews, one piece of advice is using a standard background. I will say mine's is Game of Thrones. I have had this virtual background since I was a fellow. Now, most people, oh, here we go, common pitfalls and red flags. Great. But I will say for most virtual interviews, a standard background, as some of my colleagues had said, is your best bet. Do not have too many things in the background, one or two different items to show your personality is good. I always used to have something about Cleveland sports. I interviewed in person when it was still in person. Most interviews are virtual now. Something that kind of tied my interest, I had a pin for Browns football, right? And for one of the interviews, it kind of started the conversation. You can always bond with an interviewer on something that you see in their virtual or in person, and be like, or asking them about it, because it can start a conversation. So some common pitfalls and red flags are lack of preparation. You can very much tell that by the types of questions that are asked. If you ask questions that can be easily answered on the website, it can alert a red flag to an interviewer, like you didn't even take a second to look on the website. Unprofessionalism and poor communication, interview etiquette, one virtual background, even on a virtual interview, making sure you're professionally dressed, because you never know, like if you accidentally have to get up, you don't want to be like in the early days of Zoom where you're wearing your boxers and you don't realize you're not wearing pants. So I would say dress up, whether it's virtual or in person, the way you'd want to present yourself. Test out your mechanics beforehand for Zoom, especially. Make sure you're familiar with the format, whether it's Zoom or Teams or WebEx or any other of the multiple platforms. And then audible distractions is a huge one. Animals, kids, people in the background. If you live, and your windows are open and you can hear the city streets. I live next to the hospital, so you're always hearing like the ambulances and fire trucks. So making sure all of those distractions are limited. And then a lack of engagement, especially for virtual interviews, looking at your camera is going to be really important. I've always been taught, like, I used to have a picture of Aquaman behind Jason Momoa's Aquaman behind my camera, so I knew what to stare at. So whatever helps you look at the camera is going to be important, because looking on the side or having your face one way and your camera and your setup the other way can be seen as you're not prepared. You didn't take the time to actually set up your virtual interview. And then in person, which may be a little less common, just asking questions. If there's a pause or an awkward, situation where no one's talking, you were the interviewer, asking a off the wall question about something related to the city, maybe not the program. If you can't think of something, just start a conversation. I always if we want to go to the next slide, one of my recommendations is if you've never done this, go start a conversation with a stranger, like in a controlled setting. I'm not saying go, into the middle of the city and start a conversation with a stranger, but go to, we have something called Patango, which is kind of like Panera Bread, and start a conversation with someone in line, bond over something. Your ability to be able to talk and communicate, especially on interview day, becomes really, really important. So, asking thoughtful questions, like I said, reflecting on your interest in the specific program, kind of tailoring your questions to the person you are speaking with. If you get your interview day list of who you're speaking with beforehand, taking a few minutes to look them up on Google, maybe PubMed, get their latest, like, especially if you're really into the research world, not reading their full paper, but looking at their last publication, asking them specific questions that may be able to help you discern whether or not you're thinking about research or not. Again, do not ask questions that can be easily answered from the website. And then be mindful of the timing. Say you only have 30 seconds left. Don't ask a question that is going to take more than 15 seconds to answer because you took probably 10 to 15 seconds to ask the question. So you really want to be mindful of the timing of your questions and things of that nature. Next slide. And then what are programs looking for? Really, we're looking to make sure you're easy to work with, and I hate saying it this way, so please pardon my language. You're not a psychopath, right? You've made it this far. You've gotten the interview. You are here because on paper, you look amazing. Your knowledge level is there. We really want to be mindful of making sure that you're going to be the type of resident that is a team player, that has good communication skills, that has character and professional attributes, right? The ability to grow. This does not mean you're not going to, encounter conflict at all during your residency, but how do you handle that conflict? And if you are unable to handle it, are you able to learn from it? Do you know when to, reach out to somebody for help and things of that nature? So really what we're looking for is a resident that is really willing to, grow beyond what they know now, has the ability to communicate and build on those skills, and then really will fit with the program and the specialty that we're looking for. And I think that's my last slide. Perfect.
Awesome. Well, my name is Ganga Murthy, and I am here to talk to you a little bit about what to do after you crush your interview. So I think one thing that we get asked a lot about are thank you notes, and I think people have different opinions on these. There will be some programs who will actively discourage any kind of post-interview communication. I can say as an APD, we get a lot of notes and emails, and a lot of times they're very well-meaning. They're about, thanking the interviewer, thanking us. And I think there's also, opportunities to ask questions and that kind of thing. But if a program specifically tells you that they do not want to receive thank you notes, please follow their wishes. They're not saying that because they didn't like you or anything like that. It's just that we get a lot of communication. It can be hard to keep up with. So many programs will say that they're not necessary, but they won't specifically discourage them. And in this situation, I would encourage you to do what feels authentic to you, and if it's important to you to send a thank you note, then feel free to do so. I was raised by a mother who made me write a thank you note for every single thing, so I felt deeply obligated to do so. And if that is how you were raised too, feel free to send us thank you notes. We will be happy to read them. I can just speaking from my opinion is that it really doesn't change a program's opinion of you. I think that can vary based on program or specialty, but largely it does not change kind of where we would rank you or how we would have an impression of you after your interview day. I would just say that's unlikely to harm or negatively impact you as long as you are reasonable in your note and don't say anything kind of too off the wall. And if you do want to send a thank you note, I would consider sending them to your interviewers, the program director, and also acknowledge the program coordinator. A lot of the work behind the scenes happens because of program coordinators, and they really deserve the bulk of the gratitude to have the interview day go off without a hitch. I'd say be brief. It doesn't matter if it's email, doesn't matter if it's handwritten, both are perfectly fine. And it's best to kind of send it as soon as possible after the interview. And I think when I get them, it is helpful for me just to remember something about my interview with you. So if we talked about a specific book or talked about something in particular, that is helpful just to jog my memory. And as I said, we tried to put in our impressions of people shortly after the interview. So what I would say about you wouldn't change necessarily, but it is helpful when there's something that is thoughtful that I can recall back to. In terms of signaling, so I know this is kind of a change that's happened pretty recently. I think different programs and different specialties value signaling very differently, and every program has a different number of signals. So there are some specialties that have a lower signal number, and in those cases, I would encourage you to be very strategic and think about that based on, where you want to be. And there can be differences between geographic and then also other signaling. And so if you have fewer signals, just be a little bit more strategic about them. There can be this two-tier system that exists in some specialties where it's like gold and silver. And in those cases, again, just kind of think about how you want to align your signals. And then for other specialties, mostly surgical specialties, you can have a high number of signals. And, while that can be helpful, it can kind of dilute the efficacy. If you're signaling like 20 programs, it can be challenging to really know where you want to be or what that means. 16% of PDs who responded to the NMRP survey in 2024 said that signals were a factor in their rank order. I will say, I think it does help in terms of getting an interview, specifically geographically, if you do want to be in a specific area to signal. I think it helps programs understand um, whether or not that's someone that would truly want to come to that place. So things to think about, as I mentioned, geographic preference, career alignment. So if you want to do community practice, going somewhere that is a high-powered research center may not be the best option for you. Or if you do want a research career, that may be something to consider in terms of who you signal. I think it's important to also think about proximity to support. Residency can be really challenging. Being around people who can help you through that is very important. And then also just overall program fit. I think the biggest thing here is just don't overthink it. Programs realize that things change between now when you're choosing signals and when your rank lists are due. So, feel free to signal if there is a place or a program that you really want to be at, but I wouldn't spend too long hemming and hawing over it because obviously things may change as you go through the process. In terms of ranking, so the match favors the applicant. So I would encourage you to rank your programs in the order that you want to be at that program, not necessarily in the order that you think you're competitive or you think you may match at. So, if you really want to be at a place, then you should rank them number one. And the algorithm will do what the algorithm does, but it does work in your favor. So things to think about as you're ranking are alignment with your professional goals and also your personal values. I think you can get a sense on an interview day if that place is somewhere that you would be happy both as a doctor and as a person. And things to think about again are geographic location, support, and the culture of the program itself. I always tell applicants just to think about would you actually be happy living in that place? While you do spend a lot of time in the hospital, you are also a person and you will be spending time places outside of the hospital. So make sure that you'd be happy living somewhere. I knew that I hate winter and I really could not be above a certain latitude because I would be miserable for months of the year. And so that really affected where I ranked programs because I knew that I didn't want to be cold. And so, think about those things too, not just kind of the status of the program or that kind of thing, because you are a person first. And finally, I would say make your rank list early and try to resist last minute changes. You will probably have like nightmares leading up to the day that your rank list needs to be verified. You may change your mind, but really stick to your gut and try to resist making last minute changes and try to submit sooner rather than later because there is the risk that it could crash or that kind of thing, and that would be unnecessary stress. So I think Dr. Rai covered most of this, but so I won't belabor the point, but just remember that these deadlines are there and just keep an eye on them, which I know you will be, but things kind of progress pretty quickly starting in January. So just make sure that these are dates that you have on your calendars.
Hi, everyone. My name is Steven. I am excited to be here. Thank you for sticking with it to the bitter end. I'm going to wrap the faculty section up. My section is relatively short, so hopefully we'll end with plenty of time for Q&A. Before we jump into the slides, the one thing I wanted to mention about the last section that Dr. Murthy mentioned about signaling, I don't know how pervasive this is, but um, specialty education-focused societies may put out guidance statements. So, for example, for dermatology, the Association of Professors of Dermatology has an actual statement on how signals should be used. So for whatever specialty you're applying in, it might be a good idea just to see if that exists. I'm not sure if it's like across the board. I know it's not across the board, but if your specialty happens to have some guidance, it might be a good place to look because as Dr. Murthy mentioned, it's different from specialty to specialty. So it's really hard to give kind of uh, very tangible advice for every single person. But what I'm going to talk about are some special considerations, both with the interview process as well as with just thinking about things that you can still do if the timing works for you. So red flags, Dr. Ryan mentioned previously, and I think that's a really important thing to think about. The way I think about it is the preemptive strike. So making sure that you kind of address it first. You know it's a red flag. People have told you it's a red flag. And your mentors and your advisors have probably also mentioned that this is something that you really have to be ready for. So if you haven't submitted your ARAS application, I know many of you have submitted. Some specialties actually don't insist you submit until the very end, which is, I know, very soon. But in case you haven't submitted, like that's actually a pretty nice place to talk about those red flags, either in the personal statement or in that question that says, is there anything else you want to tell me about? Or if you haven't done that yet, any secondary essays that come your way, that's a good place that you can also address those too. For the actual interview day, you just have to be ready to discuss it. I don't think the preemptive strike is right for the interview, right? You don't want to walk into an interview and be like, let me tell you about all the bad things I've done. And then let me tell you why I learned something about them. So, like, when I say preemptive strike, I mean pre-interview. On the interview day, just be ready to talk about it. And more importantly, the last two bullets here is that we're not looking for you to tell us and to rationalize why there's a red flag. Or to tell us necessarily like maybe you had some bad judgment on XYZ day and it's because you slept poorly or whatever. Like that is all in the past. What's more important is what did you learn from that experience and how are you going to avoid making that same decision or how are you going to adjust the way you study or the way you cope or whatever it might be for the future and why you're a stronger applicant now because of it. So I really am I do think there's a way to turn a red flag into a green flag if you approach the right way. And this is the perfect thing to practice with your friends and your family and your mentors to talk through that as you practice for your interviews. Next slide. Great. So if you are an international medical grad or a foreign medical grad, I think one of the most important things to do is to look at your programs that you're applying to and actually look at their websites to look to see what chances there are of you matching as an IMG. Programs who've like not had an IMG for years and years it's probably very unlikely that you'll be able to match into a spot there. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but let's say you're applying a specialty where you're a set number of tokens or signals that you can use. Do you really want to use one of those precious signals for a program when you know that the chances are so low, depending on how that signal is being perceived? So I think what's also helpful is just talk to other IMGs who've gone before you. So they can definitely give you a sense of which programs are friendlier to accepting those who have trained in other countries. And they can certainly also give you some advice on different questions that they received and the different issues that have come up. I think not to get political about it, but with H-1B visas changing and the status of costs changing, like that's going to be a really big issue going into the residency application process. So as much as it's important for you to kind of prepare for it, you also want to ask the questions in terms of how the programs can support you too. And, again, this is like personal opinion, but I will just say that we're still sorting it out because so many things that kind of come out from the federal government gets changed pretty quickly. So I still think it's a little bit early for us to make any blanket statements about what that looks like right now. And if you aren't applying yet and you're just kind of here early and trying to get a leg up, that's great. But one thing that I've seen work really well for some international grads is to actually get a foot in the door by doing some research with a particular faculty member at that institution. So for example, at Harvard Dermatology, pretty much all of the international medical grads that we've taken are people who've spent a year or two in a lab with one of our faculty and have shown like what an amazing kind of clinician slash researcher slash human being they are. And then that ends up being their kind of into the residency program. So that's certainly something to think about if you have the time. All right, couples matching. So this is something I am very, I guess passionate is a weird way to say that I like talking about couples matching. I'll just say I was a participant in a couples match when I went through this process a long, long time ago. So my partner was going into anesthesia and I was going into dermatology and internal medicine. So not necessarily like the easiest couples match that you can have, but I do think some of the things that we did really well was that we went to different medical schools as well. And so what was really helpful is I actually sat with her advisor, and sat together and got advice about how to do couples match. And she came with me to my mentor and my advisor at my school, and we sat together. So if you have the ability to do something like that, it's actually really helpful to kind of get everyone on the same page. Now, again, if you haven't submitted anything, if you haven't submitted your files yet, one great place to put this is your personal statement on your actual ARS application. And literally the end of my personal statement said, of note, my partner is so-and-so. She is applying in anesthesia. This is her AAMC ID. And we're really excited for the possibility of training in the same city. And she did the exact same thing for me. My partner is Stephen Chen, and he's applying in medicine and dermatology, whatever that might be. And so the other thing is like I know a lot of times we feel bad about pulling strings and stuff. This is the time when you want not necessarily your own institution to pull strings for you, but the place that you applied, right? And the place that you applied actually is really interested in doing this because they want their residents to be happy. They don't want to recruit a resident that's going to be miserable because their partner is in some city like a 5-hour flight away. And so they usually, I don't know if hopefully I'm speaking for all of us here. We're very happy to get on a phone and chat with the other program that your partner is applying in and say, hey, listen, so-and-so is applying in our program. We really like him or her or them. And we would love it if you would consider interviewing so-and-so. And every program is different. Some programs care a lot about that. And some programs will say, great, but not really, change things about how they interview. But the call can never hurt. In general, couples matching can only help you because I've never seen I would never imagine a program would bring someone down because of anything that has to do with couples matching. The only thing I've seen is it helped because you hear like, oh, we know that our colleagues in this other department really love this person and we like this person as well and we're kind of on the fence, but if we can like bump them up a little bit, it makes everyone happy. And so certainly can be a great tiebreaker. And in general, couples matching is helpful. Finally, though, I would say be honest with yourself and your partner about what your priorities are, right? Well before the rank list. Rank list is a very stressful time. You're going to fight about whose priorities goes first, whose priorities goes second, like who's going to stay in medicine if the other person doesn't match XYZ. Like it's a lot to think about. So start early because the last thing you want to do is start that conversation like with a week to go. And just be honest with yourself about who's going to, like, ultimately at the bottom of your rank list, someone's going to get prioritized because at the end of the rank list, someone's going to match and someone will go unmatched. Like that is a possibility at the end of your couples match list. And so you have to think a little bit about what your plans are and how to think through what your plans are further along. Now, that said, I'm sure none of you will be at the bottom of your rank list, but you do have to think about that when you're going through the whole process. And it's long, right? So like our rank list for the two of us was 80 some like entries long. And for some other people that both have a prelim year and an advanced year, it's like 200 entries long. So it's a really complicated process. So get started early with that. The last one I'm going to talk about is financial planning. And this is very personal. So these are just some general tips I would throw out there and just know that obviously everyone's finances are very different. So you have to do what makes sense for you. If you're interviewing in person, that is a huge burden on your wallet. You already know that. The nicest thing about virtual interviews is that it's really made this whole process much easier for applicants. And so that's actually why our program has committed to virtual interviews. And I think most programs have as well. But that said, if you are going to be doing in-person interviews, think about things like signing up for a really great travel credit card. Like you're going to spend a lot of time in airports. You're going to spend a lot of time waiting for flights with delays. It's kind of nice if you have a travel card that maybe gives you lounge access. So you can sit somewhere and do some work. You can like keep your travel. You can accumulate all those points to get free flights later. So this is the time to really think about investing in one of those. Think about airline loyalty. I am like a diehard United Airlines fan, even though I live in a non-United hub and my wife hates me for it because I always make us take a layover. Now that said, like don't do that what I did. Like save your time. That's much more important. But if all things are being equal and all kind of flights are about the same price, try to pick one airline and stick with it, largely because you just need the like first tier of airline loyalty, and all of a sudden change fees in general are not too bad, but a lot of the perks of like having dedicated service, someone looking out for your flights, it gets a lot easier whenever you're flying in the winter and something gets canceled and you have to fly to the cold north, like those of us in Boston that some of us are not comfortable coming to. Like it's a good thing to have that all set up. The last mention I'll make here is that you can take out a loan for interviews. Obviously, painful to do that specifically just for interviews. This is actually something that used to happen a lot when we all did in-person interviews. But those loans can come with deferred payments and lower interest rates. Just to, they can like delay those interest rates until after residency. Now that said, this is a huge asterisk on this because everyone's financial status is different. But just some thoughts in terms of planning for your interview process. I think that's all I've got, so I'll stop there.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. Again, it has just been such a thrill, and we're so grateful to have such a star-studded panel today. We're going to open up the floor for questions, and we really encourage you all to turn on your cameras and to ask our speakers directly. But if you're more comfortable, feel free to drop your questions into the chat. And if you submitted a question, we will be going over those if no one has any questions right off the bat. But
Can I just say, as a former APAMSA member, this is better than anything I had in medical school. So, like, kudos to the national board for doing so much advising and mentorship. This is awesome.
I really appreciate that. And if you guys are comfortable, our speakers, we do ask that you guys drop your emails into the chat, but also if you guys are having a lot of specialty specific questions, feel free to send them to professionaldev@apamsa.org and I can consolidate them and send them to our speakers as well. But one question that we got that was submitted several times was, how can I stand out to secure interview invites, especially without many extracurriculars? Okay, we can maybe start with Dr. Murthy. Do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So can you just repeat the question real quick? It was
Yep.
how do you stand out without extracurriculars?
Yep.
Yeah. So, I think people have different experiences in medical school. There's people who have different obligations that maybe make it harder for them to have extracurriculars. I think for me, from a pediatrics perspective, while yes, it's really great to see that you've been very involved in a specific program or volunteered with an organization, I think it's more important to me to understand kind of who you are as a person, and it doesn't quite matter as much what those extracurriculars are. I think being able to highlight that in your personal statement is a good place to address some of those issues. And I think as you just kind of as you have room in your areas to talk more about the things that you do have in your application and make sure that those are significant or reflect kind of your commitment to those, I think that helps kind of balance some of that. And that, again, the company is probably coming from a pediatric specific viewpoint, but I think for many people, we care more that you are a good person who is very passionate about what you're doing rather than the number of extracurricular activities that you participated in.
Fantastic. One other question that was submitted was, should I bring up a circuitous path to my specialty or focus on what I enjoy about it? Dr. Rai, do you want to take that one? Tell us a little more about your journey and how you approach that in interviews.
So, I trained my whole career thinking I was going to go into internal medicine. So my switch to pathology came very late. When I started working in the lab with a researcher in the VA who was a pathologist, as well as an infectious disease specialist. So I would say really like highlighting your journey and what brought you to a point. You don't need 100% experience in the area of specialty that you are applying to. I would say you need to show interest somehow, but tying back through either your personal statement or highlighting a few experiences that, in ERAS, I think you are able to now, highlighting those few experiences that got you to that point. Personally, and I can't speak for my institution as a whole or the rest of the panel, but when a applicant has like 20 to 30 plus experiences, it kind of dilutes the overall effect of those experiences. I would say highlighting your top couple of experiences and in your personal statement somehow in bringing it back to how you ended up in pathology. There's a reason, we don't choose the same kind of resident every single time. You really need a cohesive group of different types of people because if you are training with the exact same type of person, you're never going to learn and grow. So my best advice would be using your personal statement. I think the secondary essay or a secondary area with I think Stephen had mentioned, is there anything more you want to tell me? Highlighting it there would be a really good way to highlight your journey. I would say like you guys have gotten to this point and you all are fabulous. And having that confidence in yourself is going to shine through that way.
Can I add something on there? So as someone who took a very circuitous route to dermatology, like I was geared toward internal medicine. I did an MPH, I did cardiology research. I only published I had no dermatology research, I had cardiology research. And I do think that if I had not addressed that in my application, like that's a red flag, right? Like that is something where someone's going to read that and be like, this guy doesn't want to do derm. This guy just applied to derm like on a whim because he wants a chill lifestyle, and but actually he'd like spent this whole time trying to prepare for cards. And so I used my personal statement to talk about why I'm a late convert to dermatology, and why my application reads as internal medicine and cardiology, but I ended up in this way. So, like, if you think about it in that way, that I guess the way that I would say is if you feel like your circuitous route could come off as a red flag, that's the place to like address it directly. But if you feel like it's a circuitous route just because you were exploring and it doesn't necessarily read in a potentially negative way, like you can take a different approach. But for me, it was important because of the way that it looked on the application.
Fantastic. Thank you for the teamwork on that one, guys. Dr. Shao, I think you addressed some of this earlier, but one question that we got a lot was, what are some good questions to ask interviewers to gauge program fit, culture, or areas for improvement? Dr. SK and Shao, if you want to take this one together.
Yeah, I think I whether or not the mentorship is continuous and who sets up the mentorship would be a good question to ask. I think programs are very mindful about mentorship, sponsorship, usually has some kind of pathway that they would introduce. Or is this a program that it just let the nature takes its course? And so kind of knowing whether or not there's like a standardized or a more structured way to mentorship would be helpful. I think honestly, like trying to figure out do faculty and residents hang out is a big thing, like where our journal clubs conducted. Do faculty and residents go out for lunch, and what is the relationship like? And I think different programs just have different culture to that. And I personally enjoy programs that are more family-like. I feel like a lot of these our mentors really eventually are essentially our life coaches. Medicine is hard and juggling is hard, and then to develop that relationship is so essential during your training process.
To add on to that, I completely agree. I think that the questions that Dr. Shao is getting at is like, do people like each other? Because you're going to be stuck there for X number of years, up to like 7, depending on your specialty. So, do people like each other? I think that, and I'll speak to this as somebody who during residency did not like to hang out with my attendings. Oh, it's kind of weird. But now I'm just like, please be my best friend. It's also okay if you don't want to do that, but figure out a way to ask this particular question is like, do people like being around each other? It could be, do people hang out with each other? What are the workrooms like? Do you guys talk through cases in the workrooms? Do you guys collaborate together in the workrooms? What's the vibe like? that is something that's so important about your residency, is that if you hate the people you're around, you are going to be miserable. It's going to be really bad. Yeah.
Great. All about the vibe checks here. I love it. Dr. Rai, do
Can
you
I
want to add
add
something?
one
Yeah.
thing real quick? My apologies, Annie. Can I add one thing real quick to this? Okay, I guess that's a
Yep.
yes. One question I really recommend, and it's feedback I got from when I was interviewing at my own program that they had not heard this one before, is asking your interviewer what type of applicant or resident does well in your program. Because it puts the onus on them to really explain to you what they're looking for, what their program culture is like, how things come together. And then when the question comes back to you, you can highlight the things that would make you fit for the program, right? So I really, really recommend that. I got a lot of feedback when I asked this question myself during my interview season. And it is something that we encourage all our current residents when they're applying to fellowship, to ask of their fellowship programs.
That was fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Rai. I think, Brian, you have your hand raised. You want to go ahead and ask?
Yes, thank you, Annie. Also, thank you to our panelists again. I really do appreciate your time. So my question is, I know, Device today has been approached every interview as if it's your top choice. So for the program that actually is your top choice, what is the best way to portray that on interview day without sounding, for lack of a better word, too desperate or too needy?
I would say be yourself, being the interview day person, be yourself. If you are the type of person who is excited, who gives off a lot of energy, I'm one of those types of people. Bring that kind of energy to your interview. If you're not, don't try to pretend to be, because we'll be able to definitely tell the authenticity of that. One of the ways you can really like portray that is the types of questions you ask, reading the website beforehand, but not just asking surface level questions, asking for clarification on certain topics, delving into things that are important to you, whether it's mentorship programs, like formalized mentorship programs, whether it's do we get professional development throughout your residency? Do you get advice on research, or do you guys have that? So really delving into the nitty gritty of what's available on the website, but asking more than just surface level questions.
And I would just add, after interviews, we get a lot of emails about, people saying that they've ranked our program number one. That may not change where you are on a rank list, and it often doesn't, but it is helpful to know, just to express your interest or your, where you that you particularly want to be at a specific program.
Yeah, and then I think, because I'm the APD for cardiology fellowship, that's after residency, I would say making it known that this is your number one program actually is a huge advantage. And especially if you feel like your entire package is at the caliber of that institution. Oftentimes, I think even like on the receiving end of programs, they have imposter syndrome too. Sometimes we're like, this person's so amazing. Why would this person uproot family from East Coast here, And so like actually knowing that someone is genuinely interested in wanting to rank number one, we remember and then we appreciate that. So yeah.
And then just to address the like, how do you not come off as desperate, right? So like, I do think that there's a way to say like you're very interested, it's your number one choice for these reasons. But I think the most important thing to get to what Dr. Rai is saying is being genuine means a lot. I think we can tell if you're saying that to every program. I do think that there's a little bit more value in sending the message afterwards, because if you tell me that during the interview, I know you've got more interviews coming, so how can you truly say that we're your number one when you haven't met every other program? So if you do want to say it because you know it's your number one for other reasons, like do you geographically have to be here or whatever, for those reasons, like it's fine to tell us that so that we understand that it's your number one before you finish interviewing. But if you're like potentially gonna like shuffle things around, it's probably better to wait anyway because you really don't want to say that to more than one program.
Thank you so much for those insights. And Ayush, you have your hand raised. You want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, I had a question. So, what were some memorable answers or applicant qualities that you guys have seen?
So I think one question I always ask applicants is to tell me about their first job. And I think for us, it's helpful for me to know what experiences you've had outside of medicine. For many people, their first job might be going into medical or, residency, and that's fine. But I think many people have had work experience in some way, shape, or form after. And I think that gives me some perspective on what kind of resident you would be in terms of your work ethic or maybe what you've learned from jobs in the past. I think, I really appreciate people who've worked in the service industry because medicine is a service industry. And I think knowing who you are before you got to medicine can be helpful too.
I think sadly I tend to remember the people I had negative experiences with more than positive. And the things that stand out to me about the negative experiences that I remember most are people who seem to not take initiative in their own lives. Like, I did this research project because somebody gave it to me. Like, it's a weird thing to say, first of all. But I think that what we want from our from the residents that we receive are people who are excited about what they are doing. And if you are interviewing and your answers are towards the theme of like kind of went through life and things happened to me, or things happened to me, and you're externalizing it like this bad outcome happened to me, but I'm just a student. It's like not my fault. I didn't learn anything. Those tend to stand out. It's like this is a little unusual.
All right. I received one question in the chat. Um, and this can be specifically tailored to each of your programs. But how do you guys view DO versus MD applicants, and also taking Comlex versus both Comlex and STEP? How about we start with Dr. Reich, perfect.
So our program takes both DOs and MDs. One of our current chiefs is a DO. We usually have one or two per class. Um, so for us, like a DO and MD is really kind of equivalent. It's more so about your experience. Now about Comlex versus STEP, I can't speak for anyone else, and I can't speak for my institution as a whole. But we expect STEP. Your step one, step two, and step three comes after. But if you are in a DO school, we still expect y'all to have the USMLE step one and step two.
I think something actually that Stephen said earlier that applied to IMGs, I think was that slide, applies a little bit here is if you look at the website and they've never taken a DO for like a decade. I'm sorry, this is a motion sensor light, which is why my light keeps going up. I'm very sorry. That's distracting. But if you look at the website, there's no DOs. You kind of know where the institution stands.
Great. And we can end with this one last reflection question. I would really love to hear everyone's take on it. We can start with Dr. Chen, but what do you wish you had known before your own interviews? You might have to think back to it, but what would you have? What one piece of advice?
What a terrible question for me to start on. I think about. Okay. Let's see. What do I wish I knew? I think though it's gonna sound a little bit like I think Dr. Shao already mentioned this too, but I do think it's really important. So first of all, I think the interview process I'm speaking about this from like a dermatology perspective, and so the world for dermatology is much smaller so I applied in internal medicine and in dermatology because I couldn't decide what I wanted to do, and I ended up doing both. And the world in dermatology is so much smaller that like after applying and interviewing, I knew all the like dermatologists in my like cohort, but I like knew a handful of the internal medicine folks just because it's such a smaller field. And so I think one really important thing is like derm is a really small field. And so just like you would expect, like news and gossip and stuff like that travels really fast. And so this is not the time to be bad-mouthing other programs in front of other people because that will travel and that will get back to whomever. Not that any of you would do that, but we know that there's those spreadsheets that appear on Reddit all the time. And so I think it's a really important thing to realize like the spreadsheet is sometimes some of the like most terrible things I've ever seen have been on a spreadsheet, and that cannot become real life, right? So like I think it's really important to remember that professionalism extends beyond the interview. It includes how you interact with other people in the field, including those who are going to be your colleagues in the future. The other thing, like I just in general, just enjoy this process. Like this is an amazing time. Like you get to enjoy the fruits of your labor of almost finishing medical school and eventually getting your like hopefully dream residency position, and becoming like a completely minted attending very soon. So this is just the next step in like this really, really long journey that you've taken. So really take the time, and enjoy it. And then the piece about Dr. Shao that I wanted to call back on, I didn't realize how important it was to have mentors at the program that I went to that I could see people being my mentor and my sponsor. And now going back, like I lucked out that I ended up at a place that just had the resources available. But I often think about the fact that if that hadn't happened, my path could have been very different. So definitely think about who you see as a potential kind of confidant, mentor, sponsor during your residency time.
Maybe
Sorry
we
about
can move to Dr. Murthy if you have any advice on what you would have done differently. Or there was a question about any specific interview advice for pediatric applicants. I guess the rest of you, sorry to put Dr. Chen on the spot, but the rest of you can go either way. Maybe it can be a takeaway or a reflection from your specific specialty.
Sure. Well, it's hard to follow Dr. Chen's answer. I think the one thing I would add, in addition to all of those things, is that I think when I was thinking about programs, the list of things that I had prioritized were not necessarily the things that ended up being important to me in residency. I think I spent a lot of time thinking about like number of patients and caps and like this, that, and the other. And at the end of the day, it meant more for me to know that I was going to enjoy the 3 years that I spent in residency. I was going to be well trained as a pediatrician and that I would be set up for success in my long-term career. And, at some point, when I did interviews, it was all in person and at some point, every hospital kind of looks the same. Like I started thinking about hand sanitizer, to be honest with you. I was like, this hand sanitizer is sticky at this hospital. This one has the foam. This one has the gel. And that's how I was differentiating hospitals. But at the end of the day, like you don't have to be at the most beautiful hospital. You don't have to be at a place that has a certain kind of call that you think might be the best kind of call. But I think just thinking about where can you finish your residency training being a well-trained physician, which is most places, and where can you finish training being a somewhat well-balanced and happy person are the most important things. And I wish I would have maybe focused on those things rather than the things that I thought were really important about residency.
Fantastic. And we'll move it along to Dr. Rai.
I guess my colleagues Steven and Gunga over here have really kind of touched on everything. But one thing I really wish I had known before interview season started is that you kind of celebrate the small wins along the way. I was the type of person that always was like, oh, when I get the residency, when I get the fellowship, when I get the attending hood, I'll be happy, I'll celebrate. I really didn't. And that's one thing I really harp on my residents about is celebrate the small wins. You made it this far, celebrate the fact that you're interviewing, celebrate the fact that, your S has opened up and you're submitting applications. Really give yourself the props for getting to where you are because it's a long road to get to where we are. You think back on it and you're like, damn, that was a decade ago. But the time goes by faster than you think. So celebrating the small wins along the way and creating kind of a work-life balance is really, really important. It's not just about your career. It's about where you as a person are going to be happy. So I really, one piece of advice is just celebrate the things along the way, and make sure you iron your clothing before you go to the interview. I personally, I pick up on it on every applicant who doesn't, because I didn't during some of my interviews, and now that's like all I see. So, that and really just celebrating the small wins.
On that note, as the most underdressed on this call, because my office is cold and I have a sweatshirt, just thank God that everything's virtual now. So I would say the thing so I'm one of those people who I think made that spreadsheet of like, here's the call schedule, here's the hospital. I didn't have hand sanitizer. I had like all these columns and as far as like how I would rank the program. And I think the reason that I, in my portion, kind of focused on the interview being a vibe check for us, but also for you, is I think that column should include vibes. I completely agree with Gaga when she said, I prioritized kind of the wrong things. Because in part, because I didn't know what I was getting to. Like, what's the difference between 4+2 and like 3+2? Like all this stuff that in the end is like, fine, you're going to live with what you live with and you'll cope because you're like a normal human being in a job who has coping mechanisms. But I think that it is important to be around people who you see yourself in, who, when you go to the institution, you get their mission and you're on board with their mission, because that's what you're going to be working with for the next few years. And the people you see are people that you like. And if you get bad vibes from that program, I think one of the things that one of the comments I had on my spreadsheet was like the prestige of a program. In the end, like, does it really matter? Maybe for you. Some people put a premium on it, but I do think that it's important to also take the vibes column very seriously, because that's what's going to formulate like how well you are during your residency.
Yeah, I love that. And, I think I can kind of summarize everything. I think at the end of the day, you should know that you are incredibly accomplished and, at a really great position. And you take ownership of being so, like getting everything in place and being on track and now applying to residency. Take charge of your life. Like really go for the programs that feels right. Go for the location that matters to you and, being around people that you care about. All of this really matters because at the end of the day, for a sustainable, lifelong rewarding and happy career, you need all of the pieces in place, and the place that you train matters. If you go into a field that's going to be your last training spot, then most likely the job placement will be within that 50-mile radius just because of networking. And then so, I would say, at this point on is not about applying to medical school or college where like the where you end up actually matters. And then another thing is that the interview process really is a networking. Like don't feel like, I mean, there's some form of evaluation, but these people you will run into again and again and again. And they remember you and you will remember them. And then it comes down to when you start interviewing for jobs, the same thing. They remember you and maybe you don't take the job offer them, but then like a few years later, they still love you and they will still reach out to you. It's like, how are things going there? Would you like to join us now? And then so, take advantage of like meeting new people. Don't make it so painful. And then just know that this is going to be your professional network and go for the program that speaks true to you and will serve you lifelong.
What a fantastic answer to round us out. We're a little bit over time, but thank you so much for our speakers for those final reflections. I want to give you one last big thank you and one just round of applause for all of your insights today. It's really beautiful to see you guys come back and contribute to the APAMSA community. And for those of you who haven't participated in an event before, it's so wonderful to have you guys sharing your insights. You guys are training the next leaders in this field, so we really appreciate it. With that, we'll conclude the event. The speakers, I will ask you to stay on very briefly. And for the rest of you, have a wonderful rest of your week. We'll see you next time. Perfect. All right, I will keep it very brief with the rest of our speakers. Okay. Okay. I think that's everyone. All right. Thank you guys so much for your time. I will just let a few housekeeping things. I'll reach out with the podcast audio in case you guys want anything edited out or changed. I will also be asking you for your addresses so we can send you those socks because Lord knows you earned them. That was a long event. We made it through. I'm really, really, really just honored to be here with you guys. I am currently applying to MD PhD programs, so I'm like way far away from this whole process. And so it was really nice to learn all about it. And everyone at APAMSA was just starstruck with the lineup that we got. I think that's why everyone was so nervous to ask questions. But they were submitting to me, and I will reach out to some of you with specific specialty questions. But just wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my. I have a mentor who says you don't say thank you from the bottom of your heart. It's from the bottom of your hypothalamus. I don't know if that's true, but thank you from the bottom of my hypothalamus. So I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and thanks.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Thank
It
you
was
so
great
much
being
for
on the
having
panel
me.
with y'all.
Nice to meet you all.
Oh yeah, nice to meet you guys. Y'all are very cool. Oh,
Thanks,
were we
guys.
supposed to? Sorry, were we supposed to like put our emails in?
No. I realize as soon as I mean they'll descend on you like vultures. It's okay. If anyone has questions, I will filter them to you guys so that I can lessen your inbox just a tiny bit. But yeah,
Okay.
thank you for the laughs, thank you for the memes, for the stories, and especially to Dr. SK for my pronunciation of your name. I will keep
No, you
your
did
sticky
great.
note
You did
on my
beautiful.
desk. All right. Thanks,
Beautiful.
guys. All right. Bye.